26, also writes for SportsNola.com and the Clarion Herald. He's been named Sportscaster of the Year a couple of times, Hall of Fame honor from the Press Club. Of course, he covers pretty much everything and hosts Friday Night Football 24 years on Friday nights on WNOL, Channel 38 at 11 and ABC 26 at 12:05. Did I get that right, Ed?
Sure.
Okay, just want to make sure. But Ed's pinch hitting for John Forgay because John's ill and he's, hope he's okay because he's going to the hospital. But in any case, John promises he'll be back with that in mind to talk on the Saints today. I call on our comrade, Mr. Ed Daniels. Ed?
I've asked the Holy Father when he's in America to say a prayer for me and Gailey because we have to deal with this guy on Saturday mornings. It's a chore sometimes, but anyhow, we get through it. Good to have Lisa here with the Sports Hall of Fame. It's a wonderful organization, and we certainly wish them well. I'm happy to see that Roger's here today. His Arkansas Razorbacks, 0-2, is that right, Raj? They've won a game, okay, well, somewhere along the line there, but, you know, they were the pick by many in the SEC West, but I tell you what, those LSU Tigers look pretty good right now. Kenny, I was hoping to give Del Demps a scouting report on Kenny. He was in grade school and high school, he was a 5'10" version of Omar Ashik. He could hack a few people, grab a few rebounds, but couldn't shoot. Problem was he wasn't 7'4" or whatever Ashik is. He was 5'10", so he was a little bit limited. Of course, Alan Risher, one of the great quarterbacks in LSU history on the 1982 Orange Bowl team. That was a great LSU football team. And one of the things I remember about that whole team was going down to cover the Orange Bowl in Miami. It was pretty interesting. That's when the riots broke out down there. And we were headed down that way, and when we landed in Miami, we got our rental car and we drove to our hotel, and it was surrounded by the National Guard. So those were some tense times there, and that was a great LSU football team. And of course, as a Rummel graduate, we're all very proud of Jay Roth and what he's done at the school. Although he is intensely paranoid, he tells me every year in March and April, he and Eddie Jacquillard, that they may win a game, they may make a couple of first downs, but somehow every year they manage to move on and accomplish some great things, and we're looking forward to a great year from Rummel. It already has been. Robert O'Shields, my colleague from WGNO TV, is here with us. And one of the things that Robert and I talked about on Sunday, Robert's getting married on January 16th. And our running joke is, and I've told him this on many occasions, Robert, you know, if the Saints make the playoffs, I probably can't go to your wedding. And at halftime of the game, he got up and grabbed his stuff in the press box on Sunday to go back and anchor the 5 o'clock news. And he looked at me and he said, "You don't have to worry about missing my wedding." So just the math tells you it's going to be difficult. 0-2 teams don't make the playoffs very often. And 3 of the last 4 years, the Saints have been 0-2 and they've missed the playoffs. Can they make it? I guess they can, but it's going to be extremely difficult, especially if they don't have their quarterback for several games. Now, I think Drew Brees is going to be back very soon. I think there's a chance he maybe misses 1 game. He may miss none, who knows? If he can somehow practice on Friday, then maybe he can play on Sunday. And I think we'll be watching the injury report as the week goes along. But I do not think he's going to be out for a series of games, and he'll be back soon. The problem is that when you look at this team, they're not as talented as they were 4 or 5 years ago. And I think that's been the biggest problem. Age, the salary cap, draft picks, loss of draft picks in the bounty scandal, all of those things have kind of been a compilation of things that have made it extremely difficult for this club. You know, people ask me about this team offensively, and what I said was, okay, who is the Saints' 3rd receiver now? Well, no one can really answer that question just yet. Well, in 2011, the Saints' 3rd receiver was Lance Moore. He had 52 catches, 8 for touchdowns. He was a very effective player. Who was the Saints' 3rd tailback? Well, I guess at this point it's either Kyrie Robinson or C.J. Spiller. That person 4 years ago was Pierre Thomas, who had almost 1,000 yards combined, rushing and receiving. So what I'm saying back there in 2011, when the Saints lost to the 49ers, I really thought they were the best team in football. And I really thought they were going to win their second Super Bowl title in 3 years. But a lot of things have happened, and it happens a lot in the NFL. You know, the Seattle Seahawks are 0-2 right now as well. So I have a hard time believing they may not make the playoffs, but they may not either. So it's going to be tough. So we'll see how it goes going forward. Carolina, a very good team. I don't know if they're a very good team. They're a good team, but in the NFL these days, a good team is good enough to win a lot of games. Their quarterback is pretty good. Jonathan Stewart's a good running back. Their defense is solid, and they always give the Saints a very difficult time. And this is a tough part of the schedule coming up. They've got Carolina, and then not exactly in this order, but they've got Atlanta and Philadelphia and Dallas. So this is the meat of the schedule. However, if somehow the Saints get to the break with 3 or 4 wins, I wouldn't count them out of the playoff picture, because the back half of the schedule is pretty friendly. Now, of course, we were saying that about Tampa Bay a week ago, and look what happened. But so we don't know. But I do think that it's going to be very, very difficult for the Saints to make the playoffs this year. The math will tell you at 0-2, and the roster right now is, you know, it pains me to say this because the Saints have had such a good roster for such a long time, but in my opinion, I've just got to be honest with you, I think it's an average NFL roster. So, and I know what they're trying to do, rebuilding, but that takes time, and you can't count on rookies to come in and change your team. And hopefully some of those guys in the next year or so can come in and make their team a lot better. But at that point, you've got to ask yourself, okay, who is my quarterback? So there's a lot of uncertainty there. We'll see how it all plays out. And of course, Sunday at noon against Carolina. Any questions? Yes, sir.
What is the disconnect, you think, with LSU players in the Saints?
It's a good question.
And La'el Collins?
I'm asked that a lot. The disconnect, I'm sorry, we didn't get the mic over, my apologies. But the disconnect between LSU and the Saints, I don't really understand it. Because look, let's be honest about it. If you go back and look, LSU and Alabama players and how they performed in the NFL over the last 5 years, LSU players have performed better. Let's go back and look at it honestly. Alabama's had a lot of great players. A lot of great players. But LSU's had a lot of great ones too. And when you talk, Jarvis Landry had a punt return for a touchdown in the opener. Of course, we know Odell Beckham Jr. is on the cover of Madden. Eric Reed, Patrick Peterson, Tyrann Mathieu. Jeremy Hill. You could go down the list. So, you know, and I don't think the Saints are doing it deliberately, because I know one thing: their entire staff is always at LSU Pro Day in March. They're watching the workouts. But there's no question that LSU has put a lot of outstanding players in the pros, and they can sell that, and it's not a sales pitch, it's accurate. And I hope that changes. Yep. Yes, sir.
Hey, Ed.
Hey, Bob.
You were here last week when Mickey Douglas said that he was happy with the way they do their draft. Were you shocked about that answer? And if
No. What did you expect him to say?
Well,
he was unhappy?
the facts are.
No, Bobby, I love you to death, but what did you expect him to say? I'm unhappy with our draft
Well, what do
process.
you think?
I'm going to fire everybody.
So what do you think they should do?
What do I think of it?
How should they change
Well,
the way they draft?
I think they've tried to make some changes by bringing in Jeff Ireland, and I think they've made dramatic changes. Now, are they going to pay off? I don't know. Is Haholi Kikaha going to be a very good player? I don't know. Is Andrus Peat going to be a very good player? I don't know. Is Stephon Anthony going to be a very good player? Nobody knows at this point. They played 2 games in the NFL. P.J. Williams went on injured reserve. Davis Toll's out. So that's what happens. I do think Damian Swan's a pretty good player. I like him. I think he's a pretty sharp cat. But, you know, here's how drafts go. If you get 2 or 3 good players in every draft, I think you've done pretty well. Well, there's your problem then, Bob. You figured it out. No, I get it, okay? I get it. I get it. But I think a lot of things too. I think also it's a lot of things. Okay, a lot of things. And I think it's really hard to sustain winning in the NFL. Now, I know the Patriots have for a long time. Okay? But if you go back and look at the Patriots, They won the title last year. Now maybe they got a gift at the end there. Maybe it was Christmas a little bit late, correct? But they went 10 years between Super Bowl championships. So as great an organization as they've been, and they are considered to be the gold standard in the NFL, correct? They went 10 years between titles with Tom Brady. With Tom Brady. So, I'm sorry I had to say that. He's never wrong. I told one of our, Martha Spencer is a big Patriots fan. She's in our weather department. I said, you know what that sound you hear in the Patriots locker room is? She says, what? I said, sss. Figure it out. We're just having a little fun. Yes, sir.
Do you think the Saints have become complacent? In other words, they've got these big contracts.
No, I do not think they've
Sean
become
Payton
complacent.
doesn't seem to be as ferocious as he used to.
I do not think they've become complacent. I think they still have a lot of good coaches. I think what happens is that the coaches get a lot dumber when the players aren't nearly as good as they used to be. You know, look, seriously, people in the off season were asking me about Les Miles at LSU. And I would tell them all this. Les Miles has a very talented team coming back. He's recruited very well, and they're ready to be on the upswing again. That's all they have to do is get their quarterback situation straightened out. And I know Alan will address this. But if you look at that LSU roster right now, if you did the side-by-side on Saturday, I was at the game. Were you at the game? The side-by-side on Saturday between LSU and Auburn was pretty significant. Don't you agree, Alan?
I agree.
LSU just ran them over, all right? They ran them over, and they dominated. They played dominant football. And right now, for whatever reason, LSU has a lot better roster than Auburn. They have a better roster than Alabama. They have a better roster than Arkansas. So, now, how that all... You told me I had to give you a hard time today, so I'm trying. So you asked for it, right. So what I'm saying is I think LSU has improved in a lot of areas. And the one thing that a lot of people underrated going back into this year is that the bulk of their offensive line, which was very good, was returning. Posix back, Hawkins, Alexander, all of those guys have played a lot of football. And their offensive line is really good, so the quarterback doesn't have to do a lot. They've got very good receivers. Their secondary is tremendous. The only thing that was really a question mark was their defensive line in depth, and it still might be. But I know one thing, those guys are, whatever Ed Ogeron is teaching, those guys are responding to. So in a roundabout way of answering your question, what I would say to you is that the worse your players get, the dumber the coach gets, in my opinion. Anybody else?
What about the salary cap for next year?
Salary cap for next year is not good. Drew Brees is 27.4. So I don't know what's going to happen there.
You're paying a less with a $12 million hit.
You know, here's the one thing that's kind of surprised me this year is that there wasn't something done to lower Drew Brees' cap number. And I asked him about that, and he wouldn't get into it. So, but that's a nice little chunk off the top. It's kind of on our radio show salaries. There's Trahan, and then there's me and Gailey. We're making a league minimum, and he's getting all the money, you know, so. Yes, sir.
Yeah, while I was sitting in the parking lot waiting to come in, a friend of mine from Lafayette, the guy I work with, called me and told me that...
That Drew Brees had a torn rotator cuff?
No.
I got about 10 of those calls yesterday.
No, it was that they weren't going to extend his contract past 2016.
Well, I mean, you know, that's certainly a possibility. The fact that they didn't...
There was something hot off the NFL press. So.
Well, I mean, you know, that doesn't, you know, that doesn't surprise me. You know, I hear a lot of people these days clamor for Drew Brees to go to the bench. Some people who really need to go down to Walgreens and CVS and get something for that, okay? I hear a lot of people clamor for that. You know what? They may get their wish in a couple of years. And they're going to see how much fun it is at that point. Whoopee. Anybody else?
And,
Yes, sir.
Maybe that disconnect between the Saints and LSU can be solved next year and start with the offensive line. A bad line can make a good quarterback look very average. What do you think?
Well, I mean, you know, LSU's got some good players. Alexander and Hawkins, I think they'll both be drafted, don't you, Rich? Yeah, and I know he'll talk about it, but Alexander and Hawkins will both be drafted. I think Posic's a very good player. You know, that's a good place to start. If you go back and look at 2007, Matt Flynn was tremendous in that season. They had a good defense. But in the second half of the year, their defense kind of tailed off a little bit. Who was winning those games? The offensive line was controlling those games. And they did an unbelievable job in that season. Next year, most of those guys were gone, and what happens all of a sudden? So I think it's really, really important to have a really good offensive line. Those guys can win you a lot of games. So I hope you're right, Bill. I hope they look very hard at some of those guys.
Yes, Ed?
Yes.
Do you predict in a few years the LHSA will split? In other words, will Coach Roth?
Will they split, like separate completely?
Yes, and have.
I don't know.
Teams are playing out of state and they're doing it well.
Well, here's the deal. The LHSAA, I hope they get back together at the end of this year, because this man right here has the last championship when the sides were together, right? The 5A championship was the last title. And you know what? I had a coach tell me, who shall remain nameless, in the last couple of years, I hope when I win it, we're back together again. So is it going to happen? I don't know. But at some point, if it doesn't happen soon, then I think some schools have to arrive at the reality of what reality is. And I think we're seeing reality over the last couple of years. So I hope it happens, but I don't know. Anybody else? Thank you very much.